The next presentation is University Support Services for Inclusion of Students with Disabilities and Learning Disabilities could be an opportunity to improvement for all the students. Professor Alessandro Pepino.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's a presentation that will not purely technical. It's a presentation I like to give a view concerning different questions, but especially concerning the problem of inclusion of a student into university. That's I'll try to give the view how this matter can be useful not only for students with disabilities, but a challenge for all the students. The university, first of all, we consider that the university is important for the social and the personal ambition of the students, not just for the studying itself. And the human and the relational aspects is important. Just for anticipating, this works is the results of the last 7 years of my life, where I worked together with psychologists, pedagogists in a strongly multidisciplinary context. And so I miss something of my technical essence. And for this purpose, it's important to reduce the barrier to their participation, because the students come to the university not only for studying, but also for staying with other colleagues, for his life. And the quality of life of the students is an important. Otherwise, it's something we miss if we think only to, for instance, the outcome, the grades of the students. We cannot think only to the grades, but also to the participation of the students. And we'll talk also about a population that is quite huge, because the statistical say that the 5% of population suffer from physical disabilities, who have difficulties for attending university. But also we have a new population, rather new, but we are aware that this population exists. It is more or less 7%. That is, we discuss about learning disabilities. Sorry that I would like to put the time, otherwise, okay. Normally, in Italy and Europe, the service for supporting students are triggered by individual requests of students. So all the students has a problem, make a request in order to have a support. This is important because, of course, you imagine if this number grew, is coming, this organization becomes more and more difficult to manage, because much more requests is difficult to manage. So in Italy, University of Naples, Federico II is 85,000 students, and 13 faculties located distributed in urban area, quite large. And the university center that provide the service to the students is SINAPSI, which I dedicated my life in this last 17 years. And in Italy, we have an important number organization from the of law. First of all, we have a number of laws that establish the rights, just in brackets. In Italy, the problem is not to have the law. The problem is to respect the law. because we have quite important, I think not only in Italy, but the right are assessed. The difficulty is to organize it, to make an organization in order to follow the law. And the law 1799 that established the tutoring university studies is quite nice because the university organized itself in order to respect the law. It is in this list is probably the most respected by the organization. And the organization items is quite important in order to have effective outcomes. And then we have also another law concerning the learning disabilities that's more or less 10 years after, that establish how to manage the learning disabilities. So we'll discuss about these 2 points. So following the law, we can provide, and we provide in all the universities of Italy, provide individual supporting services for students in order to grant equal opportunity for making exams, for courses, and so on. And an important aspect of this law that all the universities must appoint a vice rector that has the responsibility to establish all the actions and especially to take a responsibility about the funds that are supported, that are consistent, because it depends, of course, by the number of students with disabilities. And they have a distribution, of course, and as you imagine, the description of disabilities, one probably weak point of this law is how to definition of disabilities, because it's quite difficult. In fact, you see that the 61% are other, because the concept and the definition, description of disabilities in the traditional way is quite difficult. And when the law is stated, the paradigm of ICF that is much more effective for description of disabilities were not used yet. And as you can imagine, the distribution, there are some, the majority in human areas, but there are quite a lot also in engineering. That's in Naples is of course is a statistics. That's for University of Naples. Well, now the new challenge, because probably most are present are very clear what means disabilities, motor, blind, deaf, and so on. Probably not everybody is clear what mean learning disorders, because it's something rather new that is quite more important, because it's not a disability, but state a difficulty that the students has in studying. In some cases, much harder than for a person with disability. For instance, we discuss disability for people with paraplegic that have rights, but they are not problem for studying. While people with dyscalculia or dyslexia and so on, it's quite difficult for studying. And what is a learning disorders? Now, I, of course, give you the presentation. It means quite more than 40 minutes for understanding which means a learning disorder. But just for, in briefly, learning disorder is a number of conditions that make difficult the learning abilities, that are not belong from a disease, but is more or less a different way how our brain works. That's important to understand, because it's not a disease, but it's a different working process. And it can affect in different way. For instance, it can be difficult reading, or can different psychological process for existence language, or making motor activities, or making difficult to make calculation. Of course, so it's make difficult calculation, so it's a sort of disability. That's no, because, especially because in many cases, disability means the inability to, and also is related to a impossibility to get knowledge. But in the case of learning disorders, and also these all difficulties, the important is to find a different way to to try to learn. So when it's important that these difficulties, that now the clinical is very rich and there are many professionals able to diagnose, should be diagnosed as early as possible in the primary school, because with appropriate education, with appropriate procedures, the children learn to compensate these difficulties. There are probably a number of things that many children or professor has done in the past without knowing that was learning disabilities. Now we know that is exactly a name, and that there is a literature, there is a procedure. Now we know what it is. And we know this, the distribution, you mean 35% of dyscalculia means 35% of these children has difficulties in learning mathematics. And that's difficult in writing. So in dysgraphia, 22% people that are difficult in writing. So if these people is asked to make an exams written, he cannot, but it doesn't mean that he's not able to, or he's not study. He is not able to write. He must make examination in a different way. And now the law, that's 170 in 2010, stated that if a children is diagnosed with dysgraphia, he has the right to don't make exams, written exams, and so on. The problem is that, so the learning disorder is not an health condition. The learning capabilities depends strongly by the teaching methodologies. So the important point that we have, the teacher has the responsibility, even in the school, but also in the university, to change, to adapt his teaching methodologies to the need of the students. That's a revolution. Because for people with disability, we use just assistive technology for compensate, but not necessarily we have to change the teaching methodologies. So all the efforts for people with disability does not affect the teaching. The efforts for people with learning disorder affect how we teach every day. And this is stated by law. It's not compulsory, it's mandatory. That's it in Italy. And our sensitization work day by day is to talk, to convince, to speak about with colleagues that this is work to be done, especially in the school. Many of these children are wasted in transition from school to university because many teachers don't agree about that, are not aware about the importance of change their teaching methodology. And so the work to be done, and we make courses also in the school in order to train professors about all this matter. That is so important. because we're talking about thousands of children that normally are wasted, are forgotten, probably make some work that low-level work, and in principle they have high level of intelligence. Many people in the past were diagnosed to have dyslexia. And if we miss these people, we waste these people, we miss a number of people that has a great, in principle, potential, because exactly because they have difficulties, they learn themselves in order to compensate. They have a potential very high, much more probably on somebody else who has not this disorder. In general, so the service provided by the university try for not make a dedicated context, but to include all the students in the general context in order there's a paradigm of inclusion. And so the final goal is to make accessible the university. That is the great challenge. That all the works that we carry on for students with disability make the university more accessible to everybody. In order to make, to facilitate, to make this university that works better in general. Okay, and how SINAPSI work? SINAPSI work starting from ICF. The government finances support us on the basis of an old paradigm of classification. But in order to design a individualized project, we start from this classification that consent to make a more accurate project about specific needs. And I would like to discuss about ICF because it takes time, and I want to don't miss time for the final remarks. And so the ICF especially allows to define, to classify, to describe not only the disease like the ICD-10 that is based to, and we are normally used, but describe very accurately also the context where the students lives and studies, and the functioning that is the important point in order to define what we have to do doesn't depend only by the health condition, but by the health condition and by the context. And it can be different. And this is the only way to have to define an individualized project that is effective. Another point, and also we can define the body function, body structures, impairment. There is a paradigm that is very accurate, and now is a standard in the health organization for defining the intervention for people with disabilities. Well, another, there's all the points that are outlined by ICF classification scheme. That means that is complementary to ICD-10 that is just for the finished description of disease. And one second point that is important is how to define the individual project. It is a single for each student. It is, of course, now we can sustain it, but that's one of our arguments we'll discuss after. If the number will become what we expect, the individual project will be not sustainable anymore. Imagine that at the University of Turin now, we have more or less 800 students with learning disabilities. Imagine if each student asks for an individual project. 800 individual projects, it's not sustainable by any SINAPSI center. And however, at the moment, starting from the request, we analyze the context and the solution and try the solution for specific request. How? But the key point is a multifactorial views. The staff that has the responsibility to define the project is formed by psychology, pedagogists, and bioengineering. SINAPSI is the only center in Italy where a bioengineer has the responsibility to cooperate with the psychologists and pedagogists for defining an individual project. And then we have the intake by the psychologists, the work, staff work, the individual project. And finally, this is the strategic point, that we have 40 or 50 volunteers supported by the national government that are the real operative legs, arms, in order to provide support to the student. So imagine that more or less between volunteers, cooperation, cooperators, staff, and the professor that works in the SINAPSI globally now has more or less 100 people. Okay, and it's the biggest center that has this sort of service in Italy. Especially because since from the beginning, since from 2000, nothing changed. There are the same persons, the same staff, the same vice rector, the same Alessandro Pepino that works since the 2000. In the other university, every 2-3 years change something. And so, what's important, I say, the message for the students, the multidisciplinarity. Nothing in the ability of biomedical engineering is the ability to work with different features. Is the only engineer that is able to work with psychologists, pedagogists, medical doctor, because he is trained to work with different languages. Other engineers are not able to do that. And the real challenge for your future is to work in a multidisciplinary context. If you work in a lab where are all engineers, you miss something of your ability. If you work in a multidisciplinary context, you have the leadership, because only you have the ability to integrate the aspects of different areas. And that's the manpower now, the civil volunteer, and so on. So the National Civil Service is an important opportunity for young to have to provide service paid, to make a sort of traineeship that takes 1 year for social areas. And in these cases, they provide support for students with disability in the SINAPSI Center. And the project started in 2004, so this is now 15 years, more or less, that this project carry on with good satisfaction and success. And what they do? They make books digitization, because people with disability and with reading difficulties are not able to read the book. So we digitize book and provide to the students, or video recording of lessons. I am recording what I'm doing now, because to record, if I record the lessons, I can give more time to the students to learn. Otherwise, he is just to concentrate in the 2 hours of a lesson to learn. And just for your knowing, in 2-hour lessons, normally the students can get not more than 20% of information that I can give, the professor gives. If he has more time, he can increase these features. And can give personal support to the class. The student with disability has a problem to moving or to stay in the university. And the volunteers stay with him. And so this means the real operational arms. Well, there's a number of services that is provided, for instance, the technology support, the assistive technologies, and so on. But, and we can provide a number of services also in general to the institution. We provide service also for the teaching staff or for the administration staff in order to give the skills for manage the disability. Because the secretary is not able to manage a deaf or a blind or people with have severe motor impairment. And so on. Now, a few examples, but I like to go more quickly. How much time I have? 2, 3 minutes. 4, 3 minutes, okay. Just quickly, this one, this, for instance, is a student that start again at university, and he studied and got a degree by a system for augmented communication. That's the day of his degree. He talked through the vocal synthesis. And it got a degree in mechanical engineer. But now I like to, now we have other examples for blind, where we have a number of blind also that attend scientific courses, for instance, engineer and mathematics. We provide special support for studying for formulas and so on. Or also to support students on wheelchair in order to moving into the university. I run because, of course, a big part of our work concerns the assistive technologies. And one point is because now, with the appropriate interface, the PC can represent a general purpose sort of assistive technologies. What is important for bioengineer? That these assistive technologies, for being really effective, must be customized, because especially the augmented communication, if you provide just itself, doesn't work, because it's so tiring, so time-consuming, that no students with disability can use that. But if you have appropriate customization, you can make it much more effective. That this customization must be done after the supervision of a bioengineer, because normally the people are not trained about this procedure. So the customization of this device is so important. There are thousands of these devices installed in Italy for people with sclerosis laterale amyotrophic that are completely not used because are not customized yet. And that's really important. And the important is, so the training for students must be trained about the use, and also the teacher, and in general the technical support. Now I would like to spend 2 minutes, no more, about this item concerning blended learning. You know what's mean blended learning? You know what's mean blended learning? Nobody knows. Okay. Blended learning is a sort of paradigm spanned by the pedagogical point of view, where said that the learning is reversed. spaced is coupled with flipped learning. So here before I learn, then I follow the lecture. So I have to, as a sort of paradigm where to try to change the normal dynamics for learning in the classroom. Actually, you have the contents are the same for everybody, and normally you are students that bored, students that's hidden, or students that are in difficulty. And many cases, many of these students are missing in such paradigm. And in fact, that's important, that's interesting, that only the 10% of the knowledge for practice can be kept by reading. You need the 20% by seeing, listening, collaboration, practice. So if you make a lecture that is just theoretical, it's just by ask people for reading, these slides shows that the learning is much more not effective because the time for practice, collaboration, is not enough. In all of our courses, we have no collaboration. In most of our courses, the practice is very few because all the time is spent for seeing, for reading, for listening. So must change something, and this is important for people for learning disorders. This paradigm is mandatory for people with learning disorders. Otherwise, they don't learn. So the idea is that this is the normal, where it's one workflow. The idea is to use the video lectures in order to give more time to people for learning and to reduce also anxieties, emotional difficulties that they grew during their career. So the idea is, like I'm doing now, during the lecture, make the video lecture that then can be used for repeating what they've studied and increasing the efficiency in learning. It's very easy. It doesn't need such equipment, just a software on the PC and a web. So the video lecture allows can be produced and can be placed online in order to give the opportunity to the students to repeat the lecture. And now we are making, colleagues asked me to make experimentation for recording the first year of the course, the degree course in information system. And we are making a number, thanks to the volunteer, a number of courses. Now they are played on YouTube in unlisted mode, and the link are placed on the institutional platform in order the students just that attend the courses can go to read the lecture. It's interesting, the statistics, that's at the 12th of October. Oh my God, no. Okay, something wrong would be, okay, è saltato. Okay. Now you see the statistics, for instance, for the course of algebra, and you see the number of visualization from the first lecture. Of course, the first lecture are more read than the others, but it's interesting the average time for visualization. That is not the entire lecture, but it's just in this case, it's since from 6-8 minutes. So this means that the students use the video not as a substitution of the lecture, but as a sort of notes where something that has missed during the lecture can be recovered. And exactly what we expect. I hope, and I will keep informed you after the end of this experimentation, what happened about the grades, but especially about the student missed. This was one course of the first year where every year the 50% abandon. And we hope that these rates, of course, change. Now, and I finish, okay, good. And I finish quickly. I think I finished, huh? What is the role of biomedical engineering in all this context? Biomedical engineering is a specific vocation for multidisciplinarity, integration of knowledge. So he is able to make people work all together because he manages very well the team group, because he is the ability of understanding different knowledge. And he can play an important role for accelerator of process. He supports research activities and generally the innovation, because the psychologists, pedagogists, everybody can talk about, but we have the solution. We know the technology. We have the skill for solve the problem. The other can pose the problem. No, we can solve the problem. That's the difference. And imagine, I am completely aware about that after 7 years that I break on my back the problem of psychologists, pedagogists, and so on. And he is responsible for customization. That is a key point for make the assistive technology effective. The technology, assistive technology just provided by the company doesn't work. The assistive technology must customize it. The health technologies provided in the hospital doesn't work in many cases, or works very bad if biomedical engineering does not support the medical doctor in the daily use of medical technologies. Says that the medical technologies works alone, it's a fake news. The medical technologies, to be effective, requires into the hospital the bioengineer. That's my experience in these last 40 years. And he supports the internal organization flows of the center. And collaborate also for definition of the educational models, because he has the ability to create a concrete solution to the problem. And I learned so much working with psychologists and working with pedagogists. I am completely aware that I provided my work at their service in order to solve their problem. And especially also for training, teaching staff and the administration. Of course, there are a number of open problems still, because the motivation of a teacher, the poor information concerning the barrier in the workplace, obstacles in the workplace, and so on. But all these problems can be managed by a group, and if you have a manpower, like, for instance, the volunteer of service civil. Conclusion. Which are the success points? First of all, the multidisciplinarity approach. By alone, we can go in anywhere. No bioengineering can work by alone. It must work on medical doctor or others, but not by alone. Technology support, individual project by ICF, because it's a daily instrument for working. The civil service volunteers is a strategic. Without these young, nothing of this thing could be done. And of course, the important network with governmental and non-governmental institutions, with the association, We talk with the Association of Blind, Association of Deaf, Association of Dystrophic, and so on. Because the feedback and the interaction must be continuous for making effective. We association for dyslexia and so on. So that's the final message and the final greetings from the volunteers. Thank you very much.